This is a list of the worst books that I read in 2022. Beginning with Felix Ever After by Case and Calendar. This book follows the story of Felix, a trans boy in his last year of high school, when one day a mural is done in his school showing pictures of him before transitioning and with his dad name written all over it. Now, Felix has this idea that is this popular guy who kind of doesn't really like him was the one who did it. So he decides to catfish that guy. Make him fall in love for Felix and then break his heart. See, my biggest problem with this book was that Felix is a little bitch and I couldn't fucking handle him. Like, oh my god. I am supposed to sympathize with a guy who's catfishing another person just because he had a bad feeling. He had no evidence that the other guy did it, and later we discovered that the guy didn't do anything. So Felix is just a bad person. And also, there are some moments that I felt kind of really uncomfortable. Like, Felix has this best friend who comes from a very rich family, but a very emotionally unavailable family. His parents just don't care about him at all. They're not present. And Felix is kind of going on about like, he should be grateful because he doesn't have to care about money. And I'm like, bitch, that's not the point. The guy is upset because his parents couldn't give less of a shit about him. Could you please not bring up privileges at this moment? And also, Felix doesn't seem to realize the own privileges he have. He goes to a good school and he doesn't even make any effort in his classes. And he's trying to get into a big college and he's not even trying. So like, how am I supposed to root for you? And also, he's very critical of his father. However, his father is very supportive of him. Sure, there is a moment in the book where his father accidentally calls him by his dad's name, but he apologizes for it and he admits it was a mistake and that this whole, transitioning thing has been hard on him, but he still loves Felix as he is. So much so that his father is paying for his hormone treatment. But Felix is just so harsh on him. And I'm like, yes, I get it. He made a mistake and all. But like, there's so many trans people out there who wish they had a parent who would support and love them as Felix's father does. And Felix doesn't seem to realize that. And also, the author, like, they didn't seem to know who they wanted Felix to end up with because he kept switching all the time. It felt very rushed at the end, the conclusion with whom Felix ended up with. And also, halfway through the book, Felix discovers he's a demi-boy, which, great for him, but also felt like it was out of nowhere. It was like, he discovers he's a demi-boy, then he makes a stupid mistake, and then a lot of shit happens. It felt like he just discovered he was a demi-boy just to make this mistake and be done with it. There's no real development in it. And I finished this book and I just couldn't care about it. I was very annoyed at Felix. And if I don't like the main character, I am not gonna enjoy the book. Now, the next book that I read that I didn't like, I'm kind of sad because this is an author that I really like. I've read 2 of her other books. One of them is my favorite book of all time. But Vengeful by V. Schwab was a choice. Because Vicious didn't need a sequel. It ended perfectly. It was kind of an open ending, but I was fine with it. We didn't need a sequel. And my problem with the sequel is that we get introduced to this new character called Marcella, and I don't care about Marcella. I seriously couldn't care less about Marcella. What annoyed me was that Victor kind of felt like a side character, but he's the main guy. It doesn't make any sense. I want to know about Victor. I don't want to know about Marcella. We also got introduced to Marcella's friend, June. I don't like June at all. I was very pissed about how she got away with everything. She was a terrible ass person. Although there were two things I liked in this novel. One of them was getting to know Eli's backstory and understand why he was the way he was when we meet him in Vicious. And the other part was seeing Sydney kind of going through a lot of emotions because she is growing up in age. I think she's turning 18 in this novel, but she's not physically aging. So she can't go to a bar, she can't do this, she can't do that because she looks like a child. And that whole conflict I felt was really interesting. But yeah, those were the only two saving graces of this novel because the rest was just trash. Throw it in the fire. Next, Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. You know, when I first finished this book, I was like, solid 3 stars. But then I let the book sit with me for a while, and then I was like, no, this is terrible. This book follows Yadriel. He is a trans boy, and in his community, he's Latino. They are brujes, and they do this thing where like they can talk to the dead, they can see the dead. There's a lot of spirituality in it, yada yada. And Yadriel, you know, he wants to prove he really is a man, right? He wants to be a fighter because in his community, they have a thing where women are healers and men are fighters. And because Yadriel is assigned female at birth, they want him to be a healer, but he's like, no, I'm gonna prove that I'm a guy. I'm gonna help discover who killed my cousin, because his cousin is brutally murdered and no one understands what happens. But when he tries to get in contact with the spirit of his cousin, he ends up contacting the spirit of another boy who died at the same night named Julian. And Julian will not rest until they discover who killed him, why, what is going on. Now, when I first finished this book, I was like, solid 3 stars. You know, pretty good. But then I let it sit with me, and the longer it sat with me, the lower the stars were getting. Because, first of all, the whole mystery of who killed Julian, who killed Yadriel's cousin, it's very like, it should be the main plot, but it's swept aside all of the time to develop a romance that is honestly not even that good. I'll get to that later. And I figured out who was behind all of this so quickly that when we get to the reveal of the villain, I was like, yeah, great, is the bad guy. And so let me talk about the romance. What happens is that, obviously, this is a YA novel, there's gotta be some romance. Yadriel and Julian, they start catching feelings for each other, but it feels very rushed because they've known it. This novel happens in like 3 days. You know, it happens in 3 days. And I'm like, I am not going to believe in a romance that's been developed in 3 fucking days. I mean, come on. And it's just like, I want to know about the murder mystery. Stop flirting. People are dying, bitch. And then the ending felt very rushed, like one person died and then they come back and yada yada. But the main thing that made me lower the rating for this book was something that I noticed while reading the Goodreads reviews on it, was that Yadriel doesn't really want to fight the system. He's a bit, I don't want to say that he's sexist, but it's a bit fucked up. Because here's the thing. He doesn't want to fight the system of like, women are healers, men are fighters. Because, you know, that's fucked up. You know, anyone should be allowed to be whatever they want. No, he wants to be part of the system. He wants to be recognized as a man. The women can keep being healers. You know, I thought we were going to get a Katara moment, right? When Katara was like, I don't want to heal, I want to fight. But no, Yadriel is like, the system can stay the same, let's not smash the patriarchy, just let me be part of the patriarchy. And I was like, bitch. Another aspect I didn't like is that there are a lot of Latin characters in this book, which is great, but I feel like the author doesn't really go into depth about everyone's culture. He'll throw in the like, oh, because this person's father is from Colombia and his mother is from Puerto Rico and their grandparents are Cuban. So you have this whole mixture of Latin America, but it feels very bland. I feel like we could have dug deeper into, how these cultures connect with each other. What are the differences? Because even though it's all Latin America, still Colombia is going to have a different culture from Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico is going to have a different culture from Mexico, who's going to have a different culture from Cuba, and so on and so on. And we don't really explore that, which was kind of disappointing. But yeah, that was Cemetery Boys. I did not like that book at all. Following up, we have a book that honestly, it was so bland, I forgot I had read this book in 2022, which is Horrid by Katrina Lino. So, this book, I do not remember the name of the main character, because again, it was very bland. But basically, there's this girl, her father dies, and then she and her mom go to live in her grandmother's, who's already passed away, but in her grandmother's old house in this small city. And the house is kind of haunted. Weird things keep happening that only this girl notices. And her mom seems to be hiding a secret, and everybody in the city seems to know something that she doesn't. And I figured out the plot like 10 pages into this book, basically, because it was just so obvious. I mean, I've seen people who figured out the plot by reading the synopsis, because it's just so obvious. And you know what's the worst part? Is that the character, the main girl, is fucking dumb. Like, I'm gonna give a spoiler. So, the ghost that's haunting this house is actually her sister, who she never met because that sister died before she was even born. And her mom just never talked about it. And the thing is that there's a moment where she's like in this room, she looks in the mirror, she kind of sees the dead girl, and in the mirror it is written, sister. And do you know what the character think this means? The character believes that the little girl, the ghost child, is her mother's sister. Like, bitch, if this was your aunt, she would have written like niece or something. Like, use your brain cells. And then we get to the end, and it's kind of like plot twist after plot twist that doesn't make a lot of sense. It all gets just thrown around for shock value, and I don't really understand what was the real version of events that happened. It kind of gets a little messy, and honestly, it just wasn't good. Again, very bland, very, very predictable, which I find it very annoying because it's supposed to be a horror book. And just, I would skip this book, honestly. The only good thing about it was that the writing is simple and fluid enough that I got through this book in like 2 days. And now, to the book that I hated the most in 2022. It was a book that the moment I finished it, I gave it like 1.5 stars. Just because of how bad it was. And it breaks my heart because I really liked the author. But Iron Widow by Ziran J. Zhao is awful. Everything about it is bad. The only good thing I can think about this book is that the cover is really pretty. Like, props to the artist, you did a great job. Because The writing is bad. It feels very amateurish. It's like in an editor, to be quite honest with you. Okay, let me get to what the plot is. So, it's kind of like Pacific Rim meets Handmaid's Tale meets Wu Zetian, who was like the only empress of China. And basically, we have this country that's been attacked by aliens, and then they use mechas to fight the aliens. And then the women, they always die because of those battles. It's very complicated to explain, okay? I'm not here to explain the plot. I'm here to complain about this book. But basically, the main character's Wu Zetian's sister dies off screen, and so she decides she wants to take revenge. And it's just so bad, guys. It's just so bad. Like, the only reason I did not abandon this book was because I was doing a buddy read with other like 5 people. So I forced myself to finish it. And the ending was not even satisfactory. Because, like, first of all, Zetian is not a good protagonist. She is annoying. She is unbearable. She's a terrible ass person. And, like, I'm okay when authors are like, this character is a bad person, but you need to give me something to root for this character who's a bad person, right? You have Cass Brecker, terrible ass guy. Victor Vale, terrible ass guy. But I'm still rooting for them. But Zetian is just so annoying. She has no good qualities about her. She has a lot of like internal monologues about how she wants to break the mold for women and that women can do all these things and they shouldn't conform, which is all great. But the lack of sorority in this book is very concerning to me because Zetian talks a lot about women and how she's doing all this for women, but she does not have a single good relationship with any woman she meets during the book. Like, I understand her not having a good relationship with her family, especially with her grandma, because her grandma fucked up her feet for life and made her be in terrible pain, which is completely understandable why she dislikes her family. But then the moment she meets women outside of her family, she's like, oh, these girls are stupid and I'm better than them. And she's rude to them for no reason. And then also, like, the women in this book hate her for also no reason. Like, she makes one female friend who, spoiler alert, betrays Zetian because she was being blackmailed by the government. The government literally were like, we kidnapped your children, and if you don't betray Zetian, we're gonna kill your boys. So she didn't have much of a choice. And Zetian is like, fuck you, and kills her. And I'm like, what the hell? Also, this book has a throuple, a polyamorous relationship. Now, I'm putting it in quotation marks because I feel like if you're in a polyamorous relationship, there must be love somewhere, right? There was no love between the 3 characters who are in this throuple. It felt like Zetian had 2 simps who had no personality, and like she had much more of a connection with this one guy who, again, his whole personality is being a simp for her and being a bad boy with a tragic past, but he's not really bad, he's actually really nice. And then they kind of bring her, you know, childhood friend into the mix for shits and giggles because they don't give a shit about him. Like, poor Yeezy, I think that's his name. No one cares about him. Even his father doesn't care about him. I'm like, Yeezy, if no one cares about you, I care about you, but you're literally relevant to the plot. Honestly, it just really felt like they were a throuple because of that meme of like, the best way to solve romance triangles is by making a throuple, but make it believable. There was no chemistry. It was just all bad. Just terrible. The ending, made no sense. I still don't understand what happened in the ending. The author does a terrible job in showing us what those aliens are meant to be. Like, I have a hard time visualizing things in my head. The descriptions were so vague and didn't make a lot of sense that I was legitimately like, I have no clue what these aliens are supposed to look like. I just imagined them as the bugs from Wreck-It Ralph 1, because that made more sense. The battle scenes were all over the place. I could never understand what was going on. I was lost all of the time. And honestly, this book has got to be one of the worst books I've ever read. And thank God I am not alone. Because remember how I said it was a buddy read? There were like 2 other people who also hated the book, so we made a group, and we're the anti-Iron Widow group. We're the haters of Iron Widow. Of course, this is a joke. I mean, I do hate the book, but I'm not a hater. I would never hate on Ziranje Zhao. I think they're wonderful. I love their videos. But this book was not it. It just wasn't. And with that, I conclude my worst books read in 2022. And let us hope that 2023 brings only 5 stars reads. That's it. Goodbye, y'all.